science.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about light, we're getting down to the end of the show here, but when you talk about light, what Hertog talks about in there is the Merkaba. Could you explain what the Merkaba is?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Well, Merkaba, we're so used to thinking of things as one thing in our language system, and we're also used to thinking of trying to get a handle on it, And my good friend Hans-Peter Dürer, the physicist from Germany, said this trying to get a handle on thing is when you lose it. So I'll try to be loose with the Merkaba in the sense that there are some 32 categories of Merkaba. But in the ancient language of the Israelite masters, of the Kabbalistic teachers and sages, the Merkaba was called the vehicle of vehicles, the jewel vehicle, or the chariot of light. So the Merkaba tradition began using the Ezekiel experience as sort of a proof text of a whole higher science of being able to go into other dimensions. So Ezekiel's experience became sort of the formative archetypal experience that around which the whole school of Merkaba mysticism evolved. So the Merkaba would be the chariot of light that could wrap around your body and take you into the heavens, like Elijah could take you beyond death. And if it was an agreement between you, your soul, your overself, and the higher management that you had completed your work, then you could stay there. You could actually not go through physical death, but you could stay in another dimension, which is the case that we saw with Elijah. And of course, Enoch brought his Merkaba to transform Dr. Hertog. So to look at Merkaba can be also the body of a master who's evolved into so much light that their actual bodily nature becomes a Merkaba, and they can use that to encapsulate another whole being. Well, of course, they only do it under the respect for free will. I mean, no true master of light would ever try to take you somewhere unless they knew you were ready and really desirous of learning more. So Merkaba is a geometry of light, and is many different things. But I think that gives a good sense of what we understand it to be. This will be the top of the academy, top people in the academy, which will be wonderful. I mean, you'll see stuff, new discoveries that people around the country don't even know about. I mean, we saw this footage under Egypt before the Egyptian government even showed it on TV. So there'll be new things that.
You guys have heard about the pyramids under Yanagidi, the pyramids that we found in Japan?
Off of Okinawa, have you ever seen that footage? Dr. Hertog was called in to consult.
The Academy for Future Science, is that it?
That's with Dr. Hertog, yeah.
Yeah, you're still involved with that, right?
Oh, certainly.
So,
I'm an educational.
Are you? Do you have a title there, or is there anything that you?
I'm like an educational director.
Okay.
That's a good title. Discuss critical issues with people in Tucson and also people at the university. So because that way people won't feel like they missed something if they didn't.
Yeah. And this is on cable, and it is piped into 100,000 homes.
Wow.
And I have been controversial enough. I know we got a very large audience out there. The surveys from the station say that it's somewhere between 30 and 60,000 people that scan in and turn into it on that Sunday night.
No, that's terrific.
So if they like what they see, they stay. If they don't, then they're on the Kojak,
Yeah. On to the next cables. I'm the director of the Global Academy Genome Institute.
Yeah. Director of the Global Academy Genome Institute. Yeah. I'm going to explain also that we have known each other for a while. I have studied a lot of what you guys have done, and it has an awful lot of credibility. I'll bring up J.J. Hertog, and people know he is a physicist. He have worked with NASA, and let me see here.
Yeah,
you
might call him a social scientist because he doesn't have a degree in physics. He has 2 PhDs in social science. He's taught himself physics, but maybe I think to keep the credibility up, say he's done work as consulting with NASA and with physicists, as sort of self-trained as a lay physicist. But he's got 2 PhDs in social science. He studied linguistics. He studied comparative religions with Mircea Eliade at University of Chicago. So he's really got fabulous background. And you can call him a futurist too, because he certainly fits in the category of as a futurist.
I think that's the best way to describe him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
that's the best way.
future science.
Yes.
We're into future science and future
Exactly.
history.
Exactly.
That's a good term.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we call our publication, Future History.
That's you know that publication that you put?
Chris, how's everything look through there?
Good. Just speak toward the camera. This is really sensitive, so it'll pick up the sounds well.
Now, how do you usually block in terms of where you like people to look? Just to basically talk with Augie, or
Yeah.
look at you every once in a while, or
If you're
I'm going to move my chair just a little bit this
So
way.
we're a little- yeah.
So we can get kind of like a 45-degree angle to both of us.
Okay.
okay?
whatever's convenient to you, whatever's feel comfortable to keep the flow going,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And whenever, if you get in the middle of some disordation where you really want to make a point, you can look at the camera. Then
There you
talk
go.
to people.
Yeah. And then I can slowly zoom in on it. Okay, when you're making a point, then I can slow zoom out and just get both of you. So.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Okay.
And then we'll be doing a lot of editing too. We'll be doing overlapping and stuff with your books and stuff. So.
Well, let's think of the things that your viewers are most interested in. I mean, hidden truths. Certainly, the Book of Knowledge has brought out a lot of hidden truths. I'm very interested in promoting, helping people be empowered, finding their spiritual power that's been taken away, that they've given away to the world, and gathering back their light, so they can be who they really are. Their higher destiny can come through. I'm interested in helping people. If that's not so burning an issue, I can talk about that very little, but I'd like to help people, and then I'd like to talk about all the critical issues that you and I have dialogued over the years, the ones that you think this audience is most important to them.
I got two different audiences, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because I've done so much of both things. I got one set of people that is very down to earth. They're nuts and bolt people. They want to hear about government conspiracies and government raids. They want to know, what are we going to have on my computer next year? I mean, nuts and bolts. This is it. All the hell with that spiritual stuff. That's for wimps. Now, I want to get down to the guts here. There's a lot of those out there.
Yes.
And then
And so you do a lot of programs on those
yeah.
topics.
And then we got the anything from the born again Christians all the way through the spiritualists to the New Age flakes,
Okay.
all the way to the flakes. And
And we could bridge those two audiences by talking about how, without getting into any details about conspiracy, we could talk about how it's fairly clear to most people that the powers and authorities of the world that are spoken about in the Pista Sophia have a concerted effort to really keep people from finding their own liberation. And I'm interested in those people accessing the tools that can help them in their liberation. So that way we can get the political people more, get them interested to see the other side of the coin. So they go, yeah, I can stay involved in the politics, but I can also find my liberation too.
very rarely you can walk both sides of the fence, but here you can.
Yeah, let's try it. You can do some of the guidance, but I think it'd be good to get those people.
We run into something where we have a low-flying airplane coming over and everything goes to shits for us, you can just push it.
The thing to do, just keep on going, and I'll edit it out later
Okay.
in the editing studio.
All right.
That way I can, get what little bit of it, but just let it flow.
You're a teacher, you are traveling the world.
Well, I'm organizing global dialogues. So, particularly for the Genome Institute, organizing global dialogues that are looking at all of the implications of what genetic research might mean, how it might affect the whole web of life.
You probably heard that last week it was cleared in England that
Yeah,
they could now do
stem cell
genetic research.
cloning embryos.
Well, beyond that, they can interspecies. In fact, they can put human hands now on a calf. So that later on, when there's some kid somewhere that needs an arm, okay, go cut the arm off and put it on the kid. Right out of Financial Times, London. Now they're gonna start doing it.
Well, we're in a strange new world.
Yes.
That speaks to the need for spiritual discernment and to understand the ground of our being and
Yep.
what that really is. People have gotten so far away from their own spiritual natures that this is like, hey, why not? We can do this.
Global dialogue on higher consciousness and what should we call it?
Well, that's what I do with the Academy for Future Science, yeah. And with the Genome Institute, we look at
Spirituality.
what will really be the effects of genetic research moving ahead at such a rapid pace without a true knowledge of how to shape it. And then with the Academy, we're looking at higher knowledge. There are other ways to work with the human genetic capacity, work in the light, work with music, work with harmonics, work with sacred teaching. That affects you as well. You don't have to go in and do gene splicing, recombinant DNA. So that's where my love is in that kind of world. Let's see, how about questions about where science and spirituality are going? You might want to ask something about whether you see them, how do we see them coming together? Or are they coming together?
Where is spirituality and science going?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you see happening with the global politics, globalization, or if you even, I don't care if you want to ask pointed questions. I mean, it's sort of, I would handle it carefully, but say if you were going to ask something about the New World Order or
Interesting.
what I would be very careful in handling it, but I think I have some good things to say.
It's a household term now.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, President Bush, 1991.
You
Said
started
it.
all.
White.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always fun. We'll go back. Well, we'll go back to a historical reference of
The Brandt
Bush
Commission.
1.
The Brandt Commission has approved the definition for the New World Order. You probably know about that.
You mean the definition for
The New World Order.
publications, for use in
What they
publication?
want the New World Order to be like. It's a supra-state with a supra-police force, supra-banking system replacing the U.S. dollar, and supra-authority that sees no borders, and which supersedes all nationalities and sovereignties under one leadership, the United Nations.
Yeah.
And the Brandt Commission approved it.
And Lord Maitreya is right there standing behind it.
Well, the United Nations is fairly disorganized.
For now.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna take a lot of work. We have good friends at the UN, and they throw up their hands when they think of trying to get anything done. I mean, they try. They have wonderful ideas, wonderful projects, and so much stuff just can't even get through the bureaucracy. So we'll see how the UN. But yeah, I think what I can talk about to people in the political world is I would get back to something like St. Paul said, that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces in high places.
Yes.
And just say, if you're worried about the New World Order, you should see what may be coming on the face of the planet in coming years, according to some of what the imagery of the prophets, or the imagery of some early Christians who were able to capture in language the very strange facial forms of crocodiles and reptiles and cats and what they call the dog-faced ones, but very strange-looking creatures that they have recorded in their texts, indicating that there was a knowledge that other levels of reality already existed. So anyway, that's something we could get into there.
Okay.
Get into the nitty-gritty. You want to get people gripped. Talk about crocodile-looking creatures that come in their backyard.
I'm going to throw one in here on global engineering
Tell him about that
and
one.
human engineering. That
Good.
involves
Yeah.
human cloning.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That's my job, is to
Yeah.
organize this institute and make sure that global dialogues, that people are informed as to what's really happening. People need to understand the science. They need to understand the ethical questions around it.
And that means the general public as well as the people
That's what I'm saying. The public needs to understand that. They need to be able to make the arguments. They need to be conversant in the topic. So hopefully 30,000 people, we can get them looking, 30 or 60,000 people thinking about becoming more conversant in these topics. There could be the hopeful side, because W might get a brain, Cheney might get a heart. So we can but I won't say that.
He's always been more of an optimist than I am.
That's true. Some gene splicing won't work.
That's right. Interspecies stuff never works.
That's right. Well, one of the best names we heard for George last week was DWI.
Oh yeah?
DWI.
They had him in the seal of the presidents with a little dunce cap on.
Oh, okay.
The presidents.
I'm sure they see some of that stuff.
They do. Oh, they surf. They want to know what people are saying.
It's a federal requirement now that they have their own people taping all TV shows and all radio shows. And when there's something that involves the executive branch and the people in charge, they make cuts of it, and they're supposed to show it to them, so they know about it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that was a footnote in one of the bills that went through a couple of months ago.
Well, we should probably talk about that with the,
How about the New World Order? I'll just
however you want to put it in. I mean, I would say, if I say anything about the White House, I would be saying that they're probably concerned about certain things they see, and are probably also becoming informed on issues like we are. Because who knows? I mean, I think that in many ways, I look at Bush and I see a guy who's pretty lost. I don't think he knows what people around him are doing.
no look
He's just...
Look who he invited in as his aides.
Yeah.
People that drank so far down on the food chain that probably would starve hyenas to death.
That's right.
I'll get you before you go to the pool.
Get him on the way down. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see here. What is about future projects of the Academy for Future Science?
We have some fabulous projects coming up. Let's talk about those. We have a new interactive CD on Egypt where you go down into various chambers, and as you go into each one, you get different teaching. So it's I think it's going to be a very powerful tool.
What happened when J.J. Hertog was on his knees in prayer, and that's from the next few things that happened after that created the
Yeah.
Kings of Enoch.
Yeah, that might be good near the beginning if you
I
wanted
think
to
so.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm happy to go into some more detail on that, give people an idea. Where did this book of knowledge, Kings of Enoch, come from? What was the real experience Dr. Tuck had in prayer? Sure, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And before you talk about future projects, you could talk about some of the newer materials that just came out. That way I can talk about the music and the Pistis of
Actually, I got a space here. I think they'll fit right in. Where does the book that has been out for 17 years, probably, the Keys of Enoch, come from? How did it come about?
27 years.
27 years.
Mm-hmm.
God, we must have studied that thing for about 8 years ago.
Yeah, I know. Omaha was a
We
great
went through
center
about
for
4
that.
times.
Yeah. It's now coming to the point where more scientists are working with it. So it's
Yeah.
really getting into mature period.
Most scientists back when this thing was written, like you said, 27 years ago, they said he was totally nuts.
Word
That
salad.
has changed.
They used to call it word salad, but it's
Oh, yeah.
changed. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that they in some way have come out of the same experience, because he was able to use that whole treasury of the first experience to go into helping amplify the teachings. So,
Okay, good deal. All right. I have a live show in the studio where you have the phone right there and people can call in and ask you questions.
I love it when people call in with really hard stuff. They have an axe to grind.
Oh, yeah?
Something you said triggered. Because I think that's where you get real communication. As long as you don't react and try to...
Those are the live ones anyway.
Yeah.
That's the ones you want to talk to.
Yeah. Yes, there's life out there. The Book of Revelation. All you have to do is mention that. Somebody's going to pick up and call you.
Okay.
China. They're probably monitoring everything you do. Well, Ben, thank you for thinking of this as a good idea to get some more information out to people in Tucson.
Good.
Walter came up-
Walter came up with the idea.
Good idea, Walt.
Thank you.
Thank Walter too.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and I would have really been pissed if you made it in and out of town without me knowing it.
I would have been pissed because I didn't even know you were living here.
Really?
I didn't know.
That's a great reunion.
Yeah.
It's funny, huh?
You know, there was, I don't know, probably a little less than a year, about a year ago, I called you out there and invited you out.
Really?
Yeah,
They say talk to me on the phone.
yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think so.
Well, now we're back in. Now we're really in
There we are.
communication.
Yeah.
There we are. So,
I would have thought that IRS would be trying to keep you hamstrung around all the tax issues of, you know, sovereignty and not paying.
well, they've tried for 18 years and it hasn't worked yet.
Go check it out with Monty Python.
Here comes that plane you were talking about.
Yeah.
Man, we were on campus this morning. I was on my cell phone on a conference call to Washington, D.C., and this bomber or something came overhead. So strong, so low. They were laughing in Washington. They said, what are you getting? You sound like you're getting strafed.
Incoming.
Yeah.
As soon as you said New World Order.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's it.
you know what? We were in
Yeah.
Nashville, and Nashville has that new mall behind the state capitol. If you go down it, it looks like it was designed by Masons, and it looks like it has transmitting tower at the end of the mall. I mean, there's all these symbolic things are built all along the way up to the capitol.
Where?
In Nashville.
In Nashville?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's called. What's the name of it? Anyway, the guy who was the architect was very secretive about just saying, "Oh no, I just decided," you know. But we walked down that, and I swear to God, we were not off. We had not left the mall for more than 2 minutes. We walked to the sidewalk, and this a B-2 flew overhead. A stealth bomber flew right straight, low. I'm talking low over the mall, and then soared up over the Capitol dome. Right after we left, and we're thinking, that's too spooky. We've been standing.
The guy that we were with has like been bringing out these things about it being like a Masonic.
Those things are scary looking. I mean, if any plane ever looked evil,
Wow.
the shape of the wings, the stealth bomber, just looked so bizarre, so strange. So we thought, what were we talking about? We were talking about the New World Order. Oh my God. You don't need a stealth bomber. But yeah, the mysteries of life, of the light, and of healing and consciousness. These are all the main. Spend more time there, and then we'll bring people who are interested in the other things. You can weave back and forth maybe to keep the other people interested.
You're talking about the Merkabah. I'd like to know more about the Merkabah.
We have our video, and I think people should look at that, and I can talk about that. The vehicle of vehicles, you know. Because I should bring that up in Dr. Hertog's experience. This is the first place I should bring that up.
It's very informal, and I have gone on shows where I had no questions, nothing written down, and we're good at just rolling with the punches. So
That's good.
It'll work just fine.
Yeah, just speak in this direction.
Yeah.
If you raise your voice.
And if we keep it a little louder than we normally speak, I think it would probably be good.
Okay.
Hello, hello. This is The Hidden Truths, the TV talk show for the thinking American. My name is Augie, and I'm the host. Today, or tonight, we are going to keep it on the controversial side again. We are going to solve and resolve the mysteries of the universe for you. Just wait and see. You know, I have on this show been probably as controversial as you can get sometime. And we've gone into different areas of science, and probably you heard me say before that there's only 3 areas of science. You have physical science, you have mental science, we covered those 2 fairly well sometimes. And then we have spiritual science, because all there is based on a science. Spiritual science is an area which people normally have not a clue. But tonight, we're going to give you some clues. Because the clues are there, all we have to know where to look for them. There are people that has done an awful lot of research in that area, and they brought those clues out that now is in readable and viewable form, and you're just about to see some of it. I have a gentleman with me that I've known for many years, probably somewhere around 10 years now. His name is Bruce Curtis. He is the educational director for the Academy for Future Science, and he's also the director of Global Academy Genome Institute. Later on we'll explain what those are to you. I think you're going to enjoy what they do. He's also a teacher. He's a lecturer. He's an author. He is traveling around the world actually teaching spiritual science. You know, there aren't that many of those people around. Most ministers, they're not spiritual science, they're religious science. This is different. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, Augie. After all these years, I think it must have been around 1986. It's probably been about 15 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. That's been a long time. I followed what you've done from time to time, and you know, over the years, the more I hear, the more impressed I get. I remember when you came up to Omaha, you were a skinny little runt, actually. And we had a lot of fun there. We came in and we were studying a book that you came in to teach, The Keys of Enoch. And I must have gone through that book probably about 3 or 4 times. And at one point in time, you don't even know this, but I was actually considering going out to California and going through your courses out there and becoming a teacher on that. It didn't happen, but well, here we are.
Yeah.
Could you mention something, maybe at the Academy for Future Science and the director of Global Academy Genome Institute? What is that?
Well, the Academy for Future Science, Augie, as you pretty well know, as you were really a great supporter of our work, is an educational foundation that was created to disseminate truly spiritual knowledge, a higher spiritual science that largely came through the experience of Dr. Hertog. And we'll share more about that, I'm sure, in a few minutes. The Global Academy Genome Institute is also a nonprofit educational foundation that's more dedicated to enlightening the public on what are all of the social, ethical, and legal implications of human genetic engineering, which is to say, what are we doing to ourselves with this emerging technology? And we want to make sure that the public is informed.
Well, this is an outside setting, and boy, oh boy,
Yeah.
we got from time to time helicopters going over, I guess.
So, to get back to that, though, what the Global Academy Genome Institute is about is making sure that the public is informed enough on this emerging technology to be able to make rational decisions, not to be railroaded by business saying we need to have this this technology to heal all of our diseases. But what's the downside? Is there any reason we should proceed more slowly? Should we be cautious? Should we look at things carefully? So that's the Global Academy Genome Institute. I'm here today, or this evening, here with you to discuss more the real spiritual science that's the bright side of genetic engineering. That is, you know, has to do with the whole Merkaba experience that Dr. Hertog himself went through in 1973.
So then, do you think that there is a timetable for some of these things? Do you think that the spiritual enlightenment, I will assume that we are going to towards a higher vibratory rate in our consciousness. Is there a timetable for that, or could we actually, if we went all hog on this one, go too fast?
That's a fabulous question. I think there's a timetable that we are under the care of much wiser intelligence, or what we like to call the higher intelligence or the higher evolution. Some might refer to as spiritual masters or Christed masters or bodhisattvas. So I think we're really in the care of those who know more wisely what's best for us. So if we open up the faculties of the mind, then we are in a deeper communion with these other orders of intelligence, and I'm not talking about channeling, but I'm talking about really attunement, consciousness attunement. If we can attune our consciousness and work together with our quote-unquote elder brothers and sisters of light, then I think we can follow the proper timetable for ourselves. And we could try and speed things up. You could throw, instead of opening a glass door, you could throw a rock through the window. But perhaps we don't want to do that. Perhaps we want to open things at the proper speed.
Yeah.
So I'm in favor of that, according to your recommendation, too.
Well, chances are then that there is a guidance here that maybe we're not aware of.
There's probably guidance on both sides.
Because my view of things is that government seems to be holding the spiritual area back, and the people, a lot of the people are hungry for that type of stuff. They are going forward with it. So the gap is getting bigger. Am I on to something here?
Completely. I'd say that what you point to, and I know you have a lot of viewers who are very interested in conspiracy theories, and that's not my specialty because I'm trying to keep a positive look on the direction things are going. But I think it's quite clear that some people are not interested in the real spiritual, mental liberation of the human race. They just as soon, probably out of deep fear, just rather try to keep a tight control on things. So my view is to really trust the process of life, trust the divine, have each person go inside and experience their own divinity, and thereby achieve a safe way of liberation.
Well, it's we're being guided probably whether we like to or not. We're guided in one area from some people that think they're guiding us, maybe government, and then on the other area where we may not totally know who it is or what it is or what it's for. And I think there's something on that. You brought up a name here, J.J. Hertog. I have, he's the one that wrote the book, The Keys of Enoch. And he, for those of you that don't know who J.J. Hertog is, he's got 2 PhDs in social science. He's a self-taught master of physics. He has worked with NASA on many different projects, different universities that consults him on the work that he does in the area of research. He's a futurist and he's an author. And this book that he wrote, The Keys of Enoch, came about in a very special way. I'd love for you to mention something about that.
It's a joy, it'd be a delight. Most material comes through the rational mind. And in a sense, this came through the para-rational or the super-rational mind. It was not channeled, it was not synthesized out of existing material. It represented really an entry of something new, something novel into the human community. And it came about because he had so devoted his life to pursuing the divine, to pursuing the spirit and science at the same time, that one night in his 33rd year, when he was in the act of prayer and meditation, he was working with certain sacred sound combinations that he had become accustomed to through his studies of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions, because he had schooled himself in the Tibetan, the Chinese, and also very many Middle Eastern languages and sacred texts. And so he was praying using sacred sound combinations. And as he did, all of a sudden a light began to emerge in his room, and a spiritual intelligence actually materialized and became tangible. And the being identified himself as the patriarch or the master Enoch, who, if we think back to our biblical studies and our Bible stories as children, we probably have a dim memory of Enoch as one of the patriarchs, the grandfather of Noah, or great-grandfather of Noah.
Enoch of old.
Enoch of old. So here, this great one who we know from at least from the biblical witness, perhaps did not die. So here he came into Dr. Hertog's prayer space, and the actual intentionality of Dr. Hertog was, what is my purpose? Reveal to me my true purpose for being here in this earth, and I'll give my whole life to it. And Enoch said, "Are you ready to learn more?" So he was not. This is very dissimilar from abduction cases. This is something, are you ready to learn more? It was a very open invitation. Dr. Hurtak said, I am. And when he said that, as soon as he said that, the Merkabah of Enoch, that is the spiritual vehicle or the light vehicle of Enoch, wrapped itself around the physical vehicle of Dr. Hurtak, and he was sped upwards through our space-time continuum. And so, in a sense, his body was transformed in vibration. His whole consciousness, from his mind and his body and his spiritual garments, were all quickened. And so he began a journey that lasted for 2 days, which, was probably years of compressed experience that seemed like moments.
It seems like it when you see the volume of information that he gained on that trip.
Incredible. And so he was shown how everything works together, how the lower worlds are part of experimental zones that exist in mixed light and darkness, and then moving through thresholds to where you get into purer realms of light, and then into realms of exceedingly rare light and spiritual dimensions, where you would understand the celestial intelligence to be, this angelic beings. And so when he reached these most sublime realms of creation that we see described in the sacred texts of the East and the West, he heard a rare music, and it was brought out of him so that his voice joined in to this celestial sound and these prayers. And he knew he was in the presence of God and the inner company of the divine. And in that presence, this scroll was pointed at him, a scroll of knowledge. And out of the scroll came these sacred flame letters and these light pictures, light scenarios that were programmed into his inner consciousness so that it would not be something that would be transformed but could be accurately reproduced for the human race. And so he came back with that, through those light picture scenarios, came back to record like a scribe. So we could think of him as a modern-day scribe. He's not trying to take credit for this sublime knowledge, but as one as a servant who came back to record this higher knowledge that we could use. Why would we need a higher knowledge? To get beyond the knowledge of this science of death. We've created a science of death on this planet. And that's why your interest in both sides is so important, because some of the other managers, the competing management systems, through their control, are actually choking life out of the planetary system. And this material puts life into the planetary system. This knowledge revivifies everything.
I think what it says in the book also that he was taken in front of the Father. And the experience that he had there, he came back and he wrote about it. And that is probably, that's in the very front of the book, and that is why, after I read that, I knew I had to read the rest of it. There was no chance that I couldn't put it down. Of course, then again, the book is written on probably, what did he say, about 7 levels of consciousness? So the first time we went through it, I was dumber than a stump when I got through. The first time I had to read it 2 or 3 times before I really started to make sense with it. Is that what normally people get?
Yeah, in fact, I trust that more than someone who reads it and says, oh yeah, I read that, I get it.
Yeah.
Because it's...
Good luck.
Good luck.
It is a book that you have to have spiritual interest in, otherwise you won't even make it through.
But for people who have broad interests, I think that they should try and engage it, because it makes more sense of why would these political systems on the earth be so out of whack? Why would the economic system be so poorly disposed towards the poor? Why are these things happening? And I think this helps. And our new volume, we have a new book from an ancient Coptic text called the Pistis Sophia, which means faith of wisdom. But the competing management teams, or the lower, what you might call the lower hierarchy, or the hierarchies of darkness, are portrayed here. And it really gives you an understanding of how we came to be in this situation. Because you really have to understand the history to understand how we're going to get out of it. And so I recommend to your viewership to take a look at both of these, the Book of Knowledge and the Pistis Sophia, to help understand this.
What I've also found out is that when he wrote that book, you said 27 years ago, a lot of the science that he wrote about was not even invented yet. And now, 27 years later, science has found that, yeah, be doggone, he was right. this is now science fact. Back then it was science fiction. How could he know that this, back then, how could he know that this was going to be a fact, even though all sciences at that time said that cannot happen? But it did.
Yeah.
That validates the concept of the book.
In the areas of archaeology and astronomy and physics and biology and genetics and linguistics, I mean, you can go right through the list of sciences, and in each area there have been key discoveries that have come out since the book, just as you mentioned. So we had to assemble 2 scrapbooks of scientific confirmations. There have been literally hundreds of confirmations. In fact, some were so exact that they actually pointed to the star regions where new light formations would be found. They actually mention the names of the star regions, and sure enough, astronomers have found unusual patterns there that were unexpected. So I would say as time goes on, we're going to see more and more validation of the teaching, which has a great fallout for our own spiritual development, because the keys in terms of spiritual science for the individual's growth is one of the primary thrusts of the teaching. So if it's valid in the field of science externally, then hopefully for the individual development it's helpful as well as it promises to be.
Pistis Sophia, is that a book that is building on to the Keys of Enoch? Is it complementing it, or where does that go from the Keys?
I think it's a great companion volume. The Pistis Sophia is an ancient Coptic gospel. It has the figure of Christ teaching his disciples in the body of light. So it shows that not all of the teaching could be given in the physical body. And some of it's so sublime he had to come back. And the premise of the book is that these are visitations over the course of 11 years after the crucifixion, gathering the disciples and giving discourses, but showing how profound the teaching is that even in the physical body he could not give it all. So the beauty of how the text works out in practice is that Jesus is telling the story, but the female disciples are playing a strong role, such a strong role that they stand actually in a higher view than the male disciples in the Pistis Sophia. So it exalts the feminine, both in the human side, but in the divine side, it exalts the feminine in terms of the work of the Holy Spirit. So, to me, this time when we need more divine wisdom to guide ourselves on this planet, at a time when we need the Holy Spirit, at a time when we need the feminine element of creation and of the divine, it's being brought forward. The Pistis Sophia came at a time that we really need it. And so what Dr. Hertak has done is he's taken this ancient text and retranslated some of the Coptic language very carefully so we catch the real inner nuances of the teaching, so we can use it as a text, as a guide to evolving our spirituality into the light. So it's a perfect companion volume. It's like having the male science and the female science brought together. And you're going to love it as you get into it.
Yeah, they complement each other that way. That's excellent. You are also you're organizing global dialogue on higher consciousness and spirituality when you travel around. You go to other countries, I understand, and I bet you have some fun with that.
It's wonderful.
Are they as hungry as we are for some of this?
I was just going to say, I think that there's a hunger all over the earth.
Yeah.
My wife, Marianne, and I spent a few journeys to Scotland and England last year, and we found people are hungry to dialogue. We went to a conference in the Highlands of Scotland on the extended mind, self and non-locality. And we were in the company of parapsychologists, physicists, MDs, who came together to discuss the non-local aspects of the mind. So this is now a whole new field that has opened up in the time period since the Keys was published. That non-locality was validated in physics experiments in France in the 80s. And now this is being applied to consciousness, and we're finally getting a little bit better handle on the phenomena of consciousness. But the fact is, as any remote healer will tell you, and people who've done double-blind experiments and spoken to the deceased, that patterns of light go on. They're not locally trapped. And the other side of that is the recent discovery that I'm sure you were in touch with, that's fascinating to me, is that particulate light, the common light that we get from the sun, was stopped, was frozen as it was passing through a medium. So I think this is going to help scientists begin to see that there are different types of light. There's not just the light of the sun.
It's not all photons.
It's not all, thank you, yeah, it's not all photons. Very well put. So what about consciousness light? And can we get funding? Can we get universities and government agencies to invest some of their time and money into looking at light, at the many levels of light? I mean, Einstein himself said, I could spend the rest of my life trying to understand the meaning of light.
I read a research blip about 2 months ago where they said that now they have found a way where they could slow down photon light. They put it into a box. They slow it down, and it travels through the box, just barely creeping across, and then they can speed it up again.
Yeah.
And when you do that, then it is no longer the kind of light that we know. Somehow it is changed. Because if you slow it down to that, because light is actually, photon is kind of like a subatomic particle.
Yeah.
When you manipulate the speed of it in a small setting like that, then we can also do that going through the universe.
Yeah. I think that's a wonderful application. And think about how this shakes up our physics theories. I mean, what was the pillar of special relativity was light as a constant in all frames
Right.
of reference.
No longer
This-
is.
we can't count on that anymore. So all the old solid pillars of physics are being taken out. And the Book of Knowledge said that would happen.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to live to see that. I mean, no scientist would ever have thought you could slow light down. I mean, since 1915, it's been rock solid that this is a constant velocity.
Absolutely, and he also write in there there's only one thing that is constant, ever. Everything else would change. And the only thing that is constant is change.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings. Yeah.
There's an awful lot of changes happening right now everywhere. Global engineering and also human engineering, like cloning. I just read that in England now that it has been cleared for human cloning and interspecies cloning. They lifted a lot of the restrictions that they had on it. In fact, what some of the scientists are saying that now, finally, we're getting to the point where we can actually grow arms, we can grow legs, we can grow human arms, but we grow them on animals. So if somebody out there having a car accident cut his arm off, they just go and get an arm over here and you put the arm on. This is now cleared in England. And if it's over there, we're about 7 or 8 years behind. It'll be here too. Where in the world do you think this is going to go?
Well, this is why I've agreed to take this position with the Global Academy Genome Institute, because I believe the public has a right to the full knowledge on not only what's being done, but understanding the science behind it, understanding the knowledge limitations that the technology is being delivered under. And where do I think it's going? I think it's going under the power of business. I think it's going under the power of an ethical system that's primarily ruled by one line of type, namely the profit motive. Where are the other ethical considerations? So we have a board of advisors that's composed of ethicists, philosophers, theologians, artists, scientists, business people, lawyers, engineers. So we have a full circle of people who can dialogue on this topic and help inform the public. I'd like to see it proceed where the side effects and the unintended consequences are at least mapped out a bit, and where we are very careful in the application of the technology. So we use it where we're clearly shown time and time again that it's very effective. I think there is a strong movement to not have germline therapy. There's a strong movement. The European Commission is very opposed to germline therapy, and a lot of people in the United States are completely opposed to it. So I think at least if we can step up the dialogue a bit, we have a chance of shaping the technology. We're not going to stop it. It's like a locomotive going 90 miles an hour. I mean, if we all get together, we might throw the switch and put it onto a slightly different track. Just we can maybe change the trajectory of the technology. I'm quite concerned about it myself. Transgenics, as you mentioned, the interspecies work is possibly frightening in its unintended consequences. And there are just a number of things we can discuss on this if you'd like.
Well, yeah, the cloning and especially the interspecies cloning, and they're doing now with tomatoes. They put bacteria, bug genes into tomatoes to get better resistance, and it's happening, and they're not telling us. If we go and get the information, they don't hide necessarily. We can get it. but it's not being published like it should. My own term, I have coined it, and the prostitutes in the media, they keep it from us. I think that if you had a society with a level of spiritual awareness that is a little higher than we have today, this could be controlled, but we don't have it. And I think personally that this is going to go in the ditch before it makes it out of the ditch.
Yes. Well, our dear friend Ravi Ravindra, who's a chair of physics and comparative religion in Canada, has said that he's not too worried about some of the near-term effects, but he thinks the whole thing's going to blow up in our face before too long. And I see the issue with cloning. People will say, well, what did spiritual traditions have to say about it? Well, I'll tell you quite a bit. If you look at even the legends, let's just assume with the legend of Atlantis, for example, one of the in this collection of stories that some archaeologists are in the process of trying to validate and verify the existence of Atlantis, but just say within that tradition of story was the view that genetic engineering had caused major catastrophe, that they had unusual creatures that they had put together, as well as humans who were large in size and spiritually small. They had very small spiritual capacity. So this is not what we want. We need human beings who are spiritually expansive and wise. So I see a problem. There's a model there. There's a lesson. Somehow there was a teaching put into those stories that there are ways to work with creation and there are ways not to work with creation. And somehow the ancients felt that whether or not these stories actually were historically true, but let's bypass that difficult question and look at what they're putting, or in the Bible, the mixing of the angelics with the human creation is another form of interspecies genetic manipulation. And so, and what's the lesson there? Again, there's a communication. We shouldn't have interspecies manipulation or genetic engineering, and we should not even really have the type of cloning that's envisioned. Because you have another whole person. Already there's much dialogue of families that want to create a second child so they have parts for the first child. But what that second child is a person.
Yeah.
You just don't create people as parts warehouses or, for organs. So I think that all of this has to be brought out very carefully in the public, and people need to be educated. That's our task, is to really educate.
And I think you're exactly right, because when you say we should not do that interspecies cloning, that doesn't only go for humans. I think it goes for animals and plants, cabbage, any life form should not be done, because I think it has, over the millions of years, it has gotten itself to the point where now the most plants and humans, they could live together. When you start throwing unknowns into the soup here, boy, there's some strange stuff that can happen.
Unintended consequences. We could disrupt the whole fabric of life on the planet. And the wisdom, how can the same biologists which extol the wisdom of nature to have evolved these forms of life not consider the possible problems of rapid changes that we could institute? Without that wisdom, we're not nature looking over millions of years.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Where now, this is a good one. This is going to be discussed for probably the next 100 years or so. If you clone a human being, will it have a soul?
One of my favorite questions. I'm so grateful you brought it up. Well, the concept of the soul has really eroded in modern academia. And this is something that Mary Ann, my dear wife, and I have talked to theologians about, and to molecular biologists and cell biologists about. And the notion of the soul has really been reduced to an epiphenomena of nature, so to an emergent property of once a certain level of cell organization arises, then a soul emerges. But it's not really the same notion of soul that we have from antiquity. And I often say to some of these scientists, well, look, there's about 4 billion people on this planet who really believe the soul is something else. Shouldn't that be a suitable scientific hypothesis to test? You have all these people believing it. Why won't you take it like a scientist? And let's do some experiments. So part of our reason for being in Tucson is to dialogue with our dear friend Gary Schwartz at the Human Energy Systems Laboratory. And for those of you, I'll give Gary a little plug for a marvelous book, The Living Energy Universe. So, you can look at this and take your time and enjoy it. But Gary's work is to look into these questions. And from his studies of people who have departed, there's clearly another envelope for consciousness to work through. Other people who've studied near-death experiences will tell you that it's pretty evident that the mind can exist outside the body. The mind is not only contained in the body. In fact, the Book of Knowledge says the body sits inside the mind.
That's right.
And this is a very legitimate view, should not be so severely criticized by scientists. In the 30s, there were scads of top-notch physicists who believed that the body sits inside the mind. So we need to bring that point of view back out and then get into the lab and help to validate that very, very responsible point of view.
Yeah. And I think
So the soul, getting back to your question, so to me that's where the rubber meets the road. If we can reestablish the importance of the soul, it might change the balance of how people look at genetic engineering. Or the same thing with animals. I mean, this whole mechanistic view of life is very damaging to our relationships. That's what I consider the S in the ESLI, ethical, legal, and social implications. What do we do to our view of animals? We look at an animal like they produced, I believe they produced at UC Berkeley, with one head of a head of a goat on the body of a sheep. But animals have feeling. Actually, any child and any elderly person can tell you how much feelings animals have.
Oh, they do.
And when we start playing around with their genetics, we don't know what kind of suffering we put them into.
Absolutely.
And then this whole notion of the human being and just cloning human beings for parts or considering them as different, somehow less than a person, we have to then engage in the question of the soul, because what if we create just empty vehicles? This is one science fiction problem some people are afraid of. And then the others are afraid that other individuals are afraid that we create a human being that ends up somehow with the soul, but is not treated as a whole person because they're a clone. And then so socially they're an outcast class.
Right.
So that's just two of probably dozens of topics on human cloning that we could have to face.
Of course, when I ask you the question about the soul, I think I put it backwards because I said, does a body have a soul? It really isn't that way. It's the soul that has a body. And what we probably more so should be thinking ahead, maybe we should talk to our elected officials, because this is going to come up very shortly here in Congress. They're going to be dealing with this. We need to start educating those people before it even comes up.
Well, I will give you some good news, and that is that the consultations of the Global Academy Genome Institute last year included participation with the Ibero-American Summit in Panama. And at the University Medical School in Panama, all of the Latin American health ministers were present. And they actually asked the Global Academy for help in drafting language. So I think there's some openness. I think that a lot of the government officials are at a loss. They don't know what to do with this incredible technology. So they're going to look to those, maybe to organizations like ours, who have enough experts that can give them a little advice of how are they going to, how to proceed. How can they put things into a study mode without letting the technology get away from them? This is where you have, for example, the European Commission. The European Union has a whole board of genetics, and they have a ban on cloning. They do not allow embryonic stem cell work. So I think there are some groups are very sensitive. From France, Jacques Chirac, the president of France, has indicated that even though he doesn't feel that embryonic stem cells are as much of a problem, he feels it opens the door to human cloning. So we have to look at the further consequences, not just what are we doing now, but are we opening the door to another avenue? And you hinted at that in your opening remarks.
And it is an area which there's profits there, and that's why I'm worried, because I think they're going to go there. Can you imagine? Let's take this down the road a little ways. Let's say that you can create a human that is super strong and very limited mind, just an obedient mind, has no exploratory will of its own. They would make good miners, wouldn't they? I don't think we want to go there.
Isn't it
That would be
ironic?
bad news.
Aldous Huxley wrote that in such detail in Brave New World. And you had 5 classes of society, including one very much on that order of the epsilon, the delta and epsilon classes that could just perform labor. And I don't want to go there.
But the profits are there, and that's why I think they're going to try to go there and see if we fall asleep on it so they can sneak it by us. I know the Japanese have done experiments with things exactly like that. They had a demonstration at one of the universities over in Japan because they found out about it, and then they shut it down. So there is pockets here and there that will probably come up, and we just have to be on our toes and watch it.
Well, that's why we believe that the public, you, are the ones who really have a responsibility to be completely conversant in these topics and all of the ethical issues. And so at the Global Academy, we promote public events.
Yeah.
We have experts, but we don't have talking heads. It's not expert to expert. It's a full dialogue with the participating audience, because we feel the public can be fully conversant in all of the intricate ethical questions that you've brought up, and many more. They're very complex issues. For example, gene patenting. You know, well, I look at the gene. This is where cloning is a problem. Nobody can own the gene. It's a common human property. Even some lawyers have established this in court, but you cannot always win the cases. Because if we have good lawyers, just think about these companies that are capitalized for hundreds of millions of dollars. Just think of the teams of lawyers. I mean, you know, I know of at least one biotech firm whose president is a patent attorney. The president of the biotech firm is a patent attorney. So think about that. They can get over on the law.
Yeah.
Whereas we should say, look, this is common human property. Unless we all agree on transforming the genome, we shouldn't really do it, because it's going to affect all of our descendants.
And eventually it will destroy our species as well, because sooner or later there's going to be some interspecies mingling with these, and then it'll decrease our gene pool. Because it's just like 2 buckets with a straw between them. One is full, you open up that channel and they're both going to be half full. And that's where I don't even want to think it. You know, we're living in a controlled society. And a lot of the information that we've been talking about actually probably have been available but been kept from us. As you may know, somewhere around 40% of the information in the Dead Sea Scrolls is not classified. You can't get your hands on it. It's in the hands of the Jews. Why? There is other information about scrolls and records that has come out of Egypt. Nobody can get their hands on it. Why? They're keeping it secret from us. It's just another simple thing. There's hundreds of NASA prints of pictures from the moon that is classified. I mean, a rock in the sky, what should that matter? 2,000 some year old scrolls, why should that matter except for history? There is something in there that some powers that be do not believe either is not good for us or bad for them, which is the same thing.
I like the way you put that. So what's good for us
Yeah.
is bad for them. Well, one thing I hope we can do is help people move beyond an us and them mentality, because that is how the powers that control the economics on the planet are stuck in an us and them. And they have you ever dialogued with people that you can't convince them that we're all in one boat? There's only one boat.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these people are not going to get that message. And why it must mean that the Dead Sea Scrolls contain very liberating material that a lot of people are too afraid to trust into the hands of the average person. Whereas we know everybody should have access to that material. Another example, in my explorations in Mexico, I came to a very sacred place that has a high plateau that's very hard to scale. But it's a place that the Book of Knowledge points to, and it's a place where NASA had found crystal skulls. Well, I had heard that 40 crystal skulls had been found there, but I had only seen 1 or 2 skulls. And so I talked to some of the villagers, and they remember the days that the NASA trucks rolled in. They assembled these ultralight helicopters in the village. They flew up, they did their explorations, because I believe they had zeroed in on this because from satellite they found some kind of electromagnetic anomaly around this plateau. And so they flew in with the helicopters, they did their excavation, they took all of these artifacts. went back down into the village, boxed them up, and left town. Just like that.
Really?
They took everything with them. Now, here are artifacts that belong to the Mexican people. I can't even locate where they are. They're somewhere in the United States, I assume. Nobody knows where they are. And they're important artifacts because they may contain a record of an ancient civilization that could help us examine ourselves, help us learn more about ourselves, and learn more about our civilization and how to survive together. But that's gone.
You know, the them and us syndrome, we didn't create that. They did. They separated themselves once they started getting totally convinced on their own part that they are superior to us. What people don't understand, that they are our servants when we come to our government. They swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state in which they live. And they're not doing it.
These people need to be held accountable
Yeah.
because you have a responsibility of public trust. And when you do, it's time to take that responsibility seriously and not use it for some and against others. This whole concept of privilege